We've got independent MP Kylea Tink in the studio. Kylea, this is a really important meeting. What wasn't off the table was a Royal Commission. Now, not all advocates believe this is the right thing to do, but what I think is really important is that this is now central to both the federal and state governments in many ways.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about the whole discussion around the Royal Commission is that, as we know, Royal Commissions take a very long time and a lot of money to come to any conclusions. When it comes to the issue of violence and gender-based violence, I don't think we need another Royal Commission to tell us what's going on. We've had Royal Commissions galore across other states and territories. We've had inquiries at the federal level. We know what we need to be doing. And the truth of the matter is that at this point in time, what we need to be doing is funding programs like the Staying Home Leaving Violence program here in New South Wales, addressing the bail laws, particularly here in New South Wales, to make sure that victims are protected from the perpetrators, and then looking at how we can invest in earlier intervention programs to either redirect potential perpetrators, or if they can't be redirected, find ways to provide greater protection to victims.
It's the intervention for me, which I think is not being talked about enough, because we know about the cycles of violence and cycles of trauma, and some of these men who have perpetrated violence have, you know, grown up in a household of violence for their entire childhood, and in many cases they don't know anything else. In some ways they are victims themselves. Look, I don't want to take away, you know, I don't want to diminish what we've seen happen over the last couple of weeks and months, actually years, but that can be the case, and I think that we can't ignore those kind of aspects when we're actually trying to find a solution here.
Look, Laura, I think what we do know is we can't just keep throwing money at a system that's broken and expect to get a different outcome. The stats tell us that 1 in 7 Australians will have been exposed to either domestic violence or sexual violence by the time they're 15. That is a huge trauma burden in our community. So addressing what's currently going on in terms of gender-based violence and domestic violence in our country is going to take a lot more than just building more refuges. And I guess, you know, as someone who's been very vocal in this area since before I was even elected to this seat, the thing that frustrates me most about the conversation we've had in the past week and the results we saw from the National Cabinet is that all the emphasis was still on the victims. It was about helping women run. And I'm not saying that that's not needed. We need to be able to support victims to get out of situations when the issue is acute, but that is never going to be a long-term solution to where we currently are. We are never going to be able to build enough shelters. We are never going to be able to provide enough money. And in the absence of that being possible, we need to fundamentally re-gear how we're looking at this and work with the perpetrator side of this equation and work out how we stop it by education, by earlier intervention, and by making sure we've got the right systems in place.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to get to a point actually where refuges aren't needed.
100%.
You know, are not needed as much as they are at the moment. The other thing I think needs to be central is mental health. If we go back to what happened at Bondi, that was an acute case of mental health. Again, not an excuse, but we need to be real about what's happening. I mean, one of the first things this government did was cut the number of psychologists' visits that you could put on Medicare. Now, I'm not saying that that's the be-all and end-all, but it was a values proposition. I think mental health needs to be, and I've said on this program, I think there needs to be a standalone mental health cabinet minister, because the health portfolio is just too big to look at the hospital side and the mental health side, you know, physical.
I think, and you raise a really important issue, and that is that whenever we start looking at the rates of violence across our community, the contributing factors are going to be multifactorial. You know, we do have a mental health crisis in this country at the moment. We have more people that need services that can't get access to them. We also have a gender imbalance. You know, we know that female economic empowerment is not on par with male economic empowerment. And when you have that imbalance, you limit the opportunities for people to be able to leave and to live independently. So I think, again, it is where, you know, during the week we saw the Prime Minister come together with all of our state premiers. They had one virtual meeting, a Zoom meeting, and then they separated and said, we'll come back together in 3 months' time. They threw money at a program that already exists The money they offered is only worth $5,000 to someone fleeing domestic violence. Of that, they're only receiving $1,500 cash in hand. The rest is given to them in vouchers for goods and services. Now, if you're a woman with children in tow, $1,500 cash is not going to get you out of a violent situation for very long or very far.
No.
If we can, however...
And it doesn't actually help women get out.
No, well...
It's actually... I mean, it's so hard to get the money, and look, there should be all these checks and balances if it's taxpayers' money, but you already have to be, get to a level of proof that you can't live in that home.
Well, and I think
it doesn't seem very practical to me, to be honest. I think the intention is there, but when you are in that sometimes life or death situation, filling out paperwork and having to prove your circumstances.
Well, we know that's why,
difficult.
victims are choosing between violence or poverty every day. That is the choice they face at the moment. But it is why a program like Staying Home Leaving Violence is so important. We have over 130 local government areas in New South Wales. Of those, 91 currently have access to the Staying Home Leaving Violence program. It works. And how that works is the perpetrator is taken out of the home and the victim and the children is allowed to stay in the home. Of the local government areas that don't have access to that program at the moment, they are all predominantly on the northern side of the Sydney Harbour. It is areas like Epping and Ryde, like Mossman and Balgowlah. Why are those communities being denied access to that program? And as we hear this press conference come from the New South Wales Government, I am sincerely hoping that we will hear from the Premier that they are going to fund that program fully right across our state, because we know that's how we can keep women and children safe.
Kylea Tink, thanks so much for your time.